Imposter syndrome makes you feel like you aren't good at your job. But oftentimes, guess what? These feelings are based on fear. They're not based on reality. So the best way to fight imposter syndrome is to separate your feelings from the facts. Welcome to the Workforce Link podcast, where we're offering forward-thinking conversations for the workforce, linking employers and job seekers to a brighter tomorrow. I'm your host, Sunday Jo Graham, and so glad to be back with you for another episode. So I would be so bold as to say that in one way or another, we've all dealt with imposter syndrome at work. And you might not even realize you have, or you may not even realize it yet. I'll say that. So perhaps after today's episode, we can shine a light on where you may be struggling in that area. And shine a light not to shame you, but shine a light to say, hey, this is where I've got some work to improve, right? So if you've ever felt like you don't belong or deserve your job, guess what? You're not alone. I ran across this article recently from Asana on unmasking imposter syndrome. And honestly, it was just too good not to share. So today we're going to spend some time breaking this article down as we talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome on the job. Before we dive in though, I would love to ask a favor. Make sure you share this episode with somebody else. You know, the more you share, the more people we get to help, and we're grateful for that. Maybe you know somebody who's struggling with this very thing, imposter syndrome. Send them this episode, let them know their whole life is about to change. And thank you in advance for sharing. Now, let's get to today's episode on how to overcome imposter syndrome on the job. First, let's dive into what imposter syndrome is. So according to the Asana article, which by the way, I will share the link in the show notes to the whole article, imposter syndrome is a sense of self-doubt related to work accomplishments. So you might have feelings of phoniness and think you don't deserve your job. Oftentimes, imposter syndrome makes you feel like you're tricking your coworkers into thinking you're good at your job. Oh, wow. Okay. So other symptoms include lack of self-confidence at work, sensitivity of small mistakes, fear of failing your team, and burnout from working too hard. So according to Asana's research, nearly 2/3, that's 62%, of knowledge workers worldwide reported experiencing imposter syndrome. 62%. So all types of people experience imposter syndrome, not just new hires. Team members in more senior positions are actually more likely than average to experience imposter syndrome. Wow, I'm going to say that again. Team members in more senior positions are actually more likely than average to experience imposter syndrome. So interesting. Okay, so let's break down some characteristics of imposter syndrome in this article. It says everyone experiences imposter syndrome slightly differently, but common characteristics include self-doubt in your skills and competence, crediting external factors like luck for your success, decreased self-confidence, isolating from team members, perfectionism, experiencing overwork and burnout, setting impossibly high standards for yourself, low self-esteem, and intense fear of failure. I've never struggled with any of those ever, she says as her nose grows. Okay, so let's talk about real quick the imposter syndrome during the pandemic. So the pandemic in 2020, this says, also caused a rise in imposter syndrome. In fact, 47% of knowledge workers worldwide reported feelings of imposter syndrome, increasing in 2020. That's 47%. Feeling isolated from your team while working from home or distributed is natural, this says. Dr. Sahar Yusuf, and if I butchered that name, I sincerely apologize, cognitive neuroscientist at UC Berkeley, says, with fewer opportunities to connect and celebrate success, remote work is intensifying imposter syndrome. Organizations should ensure that work is still being recognized and championed in remote environments on a daily basis, and that new hires have support structures in place to instill confidence. That's good. Okay, now let's dive into the 5 types of imposter syndrome. So Dr. Valerie Young, an internationally known expert on the subject and author of The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. Say that 3 times fast. She identifies 5 types of imposters in her research. The first type is the perfectionist. So the perfectionist is a person whose primary focus is on how something is done instead of the overall outcome. How something is done instead of the overall outcome. So despite receiving praise, you believe that you could have done better? I'm just going to be honest. I struggle with that one for sure. So number one, the perfectionist. Number two, the expert. So when someone is more concerned about what and how much they know or can do, they may suffer from an expert mindset. In a scenario where you have a minor lack of knowledge, this extreme expectation of yourself can bring feelings of failure and shame. Number two, the expert. Okay, number three, the natural genius. So this type of person measures their competence by speed and by ease. When you feel like this, you equate not understanding a subject or performing a skill successfully on the first try with failure. Oh man, that's got to be hard. So I'm going to read that again. When you feel like this, you equate not understanding a subject or performing a skill successfully on the first try with failure. All right, number three, that was the natural genius. Number four, the soloist. Focusing more on who carries out the task, this type of imposter believes they have to be the one to do everything on their own. If you fall into this archetype, you may believe that asking for help or needing assistance is a sign of weakness. I'll admit I've struggled with this one as well. Number four, the soloist. All right, on to number five, the superhuman. So this describes somebody who measures their success by how many roles they can both juggle and master. So with this mindset, you might feel guilty. You might feel ashamed when falling short in any role, even while excelling in others. Wow. So number five, the superhuman. If I could pick the one I relate to most, I would say it'd probably be number four. Probably, yeah, number four, the soloist. What about you? I would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share that with us in the comments wherever you listen to this podcast or watch it for that matter. You know, it's really hard to cope with imposter syndrome. And so when you feel like an imposter, telling other people about these feelings can also be difficult, right? Because I think shame comes with that. And as a manager, you want to support your team, but it's tricky to spot and address imposter syndrome sometimes, right? Especially when we're in it ourselves and we can't often see things in that, you know, like we especially can't see it in ourselves, but sometimes it's hard to see it in other people when we can't see it in ourselves as well. And sometimes it's easier to see it in other people because we can see it in ourselves. But regardless of your situation, regardless of your exact feelings, here's the deal. Like, you're not alone, right? None of us are alone in this. So if you're a fan of statistics, remember this statistic, okay? Remember that 62% of global employees feel imposter syndrome. 62%. So we're not alone, okay? Before we dive into the 9 ways to overcome imposter syndrome, I want to share some exciting news from the Central Workforce Development Region and State Fair Community College. Introducing our CDL training program, your gateway to a thriving trucking career. You'll gain the needed skills in just 4 weeks, experiencing a unique blend of classroom instructions and hands-on driving. Navigate both automatic and manual transmissions, ensuring you're prepared for any challenge. And the best part is, upon completing the program, you'll possess a CDL and benefit from job placement assistance. So if you're ready to take the wheel of your future, you can learn more about our program at cwdregion.com/SFCC. That's cwdregion.com/SFCC. And I will share the link to that in the show notes. And tuition assistance is available for those who qualify. So if you're personally struggling with imposter syndrome, there are a lot of actions that you can take to reduce those feelings. And the most important thing to do is remember that you are not alone, okay? And those feelings that you're feeling, they aren't abnormal. I'm gonna say that again. You are not alone in this, okay? When you want to succeed, it's common to feel like you're not doing a good enough job. But over time, those feelings can turn into imposter syndrome, okay? But with hard work, with time, you can overcome it. And here's how. Again, this is from the Asana article. Again, I'll share the link to that article in the show notes for you. So the first thing you want to do is focus on the facts. Imposter syndrome makes you feel like you aren't good at your job. But oftentimes, guess what? These feelings are based on fear. They're not based on reality. So the best way to fight imposter syndrome is to separate your feelings from the facts. Okay, you got to separate the two. So the conscious leadership group calls this facts versus stories. So facts are observable truths, right? So things a video camera picks up on, those are facts. Stories are how you interpret those facts. So you can't keep your brain from creating stories, but you can center yourself around the facts, right? So the next time you're in a situation that makes you feel like an imposter, go back to that. Go back to the facts versus story and say, is this a fact Or is this a story which is causing me to interpret those facts in a way that's not reality? Okay. So the first thing you want to do, focus on the facts. Number 2, acknowledge, validate, then let it go. Just because your interpretations of an event are stories rather than facts, right, doesn't mean that your feelings are any less valid. Okay. I want to say that again. It doesn't mean that your feelings are any less valid. Combating imposter syndrome is not about ignoring your emotions. But the best way to fight that feeling is to acknowledge that you're feeling poorly. You want to validate that it's okay. And then you want to let those feelings go if they aren't based on reality. We actually talked about a way to process through your feelings. It was actually related to job loss, but I still think it fits into this, how to process your feelings, how to process your emotions. We talked about that in a previous episode, and I will share the link to that in the show notes for you. So number 2, acknowledge, validate, then let it go. Number 3, share how you're feeling. Imposter syndrome is a very isolating feeling. But just like we shared above, those feelings, they're really common in the workplace, right? So nearly 2/3, we shared this a while ago, 62% of knowledge workers worldwide have experienced imposter syndrome. So remember this, the next time you feel that way, try to share those feelings with somebody else. Why? Because somebody else is feeling them too, right? And there are 2 advantages to sharing how you're feeling. Instead of internalizing the emotions, you get to recognize them, you get to move on. So when you keep your feelings a secret, those feelings of imposter syndrome a secret, guess what? They're growing bigger, 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 and then they get harder to deal with, right? So share those feelings now. Share them while they're small. Share them with somebody else because it's a great way to recognize them on that path towards overcoming imposter syndrome. Okay? And then you might find somebody who's right also experienced imposter syndrome. Like we said, 62% have experienced it. So you might find that person that you can confide in that's felt the same thing. And this helps you, again, feel like you aren't so alone in how you feel. So number 3, share how you're feeling. Number 4, look for evidence. So if acknowledging or sharing your feelings isn't helping, try fighting your feelings with the evidence, with the truth, right? So again, we've talked about facts versus stories. Imposter syndrome isn't based on facts, right? So focus on the facts that are going to fight those feelings, right? I'm going to say that again. Focus on the facts that are going to fight those feelings. And if you often feel like you're not getting your work done on time, here's some steps that Asana recommends. Go back over your most recent projects. Review your work to see if those feelings are based on fact. If they are, then you've identified something concrete that you can work on and that you can improve, right? If they aren't, use these facts every time that voice in your brain pipes up to tell you you aren't good enough. The facts, truth, right, combats the lies. And if you don't have an easy way to review your work, try using a work management tool, just like Asana, right? They offer a great one. Those tools help you organize your work. Look back on past projects. They help you get set up for success on any future projects. Okay, so number 4, look for evidence. Number 5, reframe your thoughts. There's power in our thoughts, right? The way we approach the world has the power to shape our reality, whether that's negative or whether that's positive. So if you suffer from negative thoughts all the time or often, start monitoring your voice. Start monitoring your mental voice and modify it where possible. And this isn't going to happen overnight, right? It's not going to just have immediate results. But if you keep doing it over time, it's going to help you approach situations in a more positive light. So start paying attention to what you're saying over and over and over again, what you're allowing those negative thoughts to turn into. Okay. So for example, the next time you make a mistake, try thinking, hey, that wasn't my best work, but I'll do better next time, right? Instead of, oh, that was awful. This is horrible. I'm never going to amount to anything. I screwed everything up, right? Just acknowledge it. That wasn't my best work. Hey, I'll do better next time. Doesn't that like feel so much better just saying it out loud? By reframing your mental language, you're rewiring your brain to be more positive, to be more supportive. So number 5, reframe your thoughts. Number 6, look for a mentor. So to fight imposter syndrome, try improving your hard skills, your soft skills. That way, whenever that little voice in your head whispers that you're not good enough, that you're just horrible at something, you can whisper back, hey, I'm in the process of getting better, right? And a great way to do this is to find a mentor. So look for someone in your company, look for someone in your field who can give you practical advice and support. Might be a senior leader, a manager, might even be a leader at another company that you look up to. That's okay too. Also, everything that we've just talked about in step 6, we actually have covered in previous episodes, from talking about hard skills to soft skills to finding a mentor. I encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes, and I will share the link to all of those in the show notes for you. So number 6, look for a mentor. Number 7, learn from your team members. A common symptom of imposter syndrome is comparing yourself to your peers and thinking that you're worse at your job than they are. And while comparing yourself can be tempting, there's so much more that you can do to reframe those feelings, okay? Comparing yourself is just going to get you into trouble. So the next time you feel tempted to compare yourself to your peers, take a step back for a minute and actually just ask yourself what you can learn from them. So here's the facts. You're going to have team members who have strengths in certain areas that you don't, right? And vice versa. That does not make you less capable. That doesn't make you less worthy, but what it does is create an opportunity for your team to learn from one another, to grow, to succeed in your roles, right? So number 7, learn from your team members. Number 8, anticipate imposter syndrome to reduce its effects. So over time, you might notice that you always experience imposter syndrome when maybe something specific happens, a very specific event. If that's the case, guess what? Be aware of it and then prepare yourself in advance so when that situation comes, you're ready to hit it head on, right? Asana gives a great example of this. So let's say you typically get nervous while filling out your self-review, maybe during your quarterly review, yearly review, however that works for you. If that level of reflection makes you uncomfortable, then try to keep a list of things you accomplish over the course of the quarter or over the course of a year. That way, when that time rolls around for you, you already have your self-review written, right? You don't even have to worry about it because you've tracked that. So anticipate imposter syndrome to reduce its effects. And number 9, toot your own horn just a little bit. Sometimes the best way to fight imposter syndrome is to face it head on. So the next time you feel like you did something well, guess what? Celebrate that. Don't feel bad about celebrating it. If you're comfortable, share your accomplishments with your team so that they can celebrate along with you. And you aren't limited to doing this just when you do a good job either, okay? Like, create a list of the qualities and the skills that you possess. And these can be specific to your role as well. Maybe being a great salesperson, maybe being great at talking others down, whatever that is. Or it can be more general to who you are. Like, maybe you're always there for your team members. Whatever the case is, don't be afraid to toot your own horn, okay? Celebrate. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Let's do a quick recap on how we can overcome imposter syndrome. Number 1, focus on the facts. 2, acknowledge, validate, then let go. Number 3, share how you're feeling. Number 4, look for evidence. 5, reframe your thoughts. Number 6, look for a mentor. 7, learn from your team members. Number 8, anticipate imposter syndrome to reduce its effects. And number 9, toot your own horn. I know this has been a longer episode than we normally do, but it's just been a great article to unpack. And actually, there's more in this article specifically talking about how to help managers and leaders overcome imposter syndrome. And I think I'm going to cover that in another episode because it's worth diving into for sure. And I have shared the link to the article in the show notes if you want to dive into it yourself. So remember that overcoming imposter syndrome is an ongoing journey. Embracing these strategies is not just about improving your work life, okay? It's about adopting a healthier relationship with yourself. And remember this, you are not alone in this experience, okay? If you've enjoyed today's episode, would you mind sharing it with somebody else that you think could benefit? And don't forget to leave us a review and let us know what you thought of this episode. It really does mean a lot to us, and it helps us stay visible so others can find us. And if you need any assistance with job searching, gaining more work skills, learning about our training program, resume assistance, you name it, we've got you covered with our Central Region Job Centers, okay? You can find your closest job center at cwdregion.com/job centers, and I will share the link in the show notes for you. Have a great week, my friend, and we will meet again in the next episode. Until then, remember this, there's always a brighter tomorrow if you're willing to find it.
The Central Region Workforce Development Board Incorporated and COPIC are equal opportunity employers and programs. Auxiliary aids and services are available upon request to individuals with disabilities. Missouri Relay Services at 711.